Hi, Tricia Pimental here, your Portugal correspondent for International Living. I've had some questions come to me from you all out there on Facebook, so I thought I would get to it and answer some that I can, which is all of them, of course. Um, Jim P. says, Tricia, headed to Atlantic coast of France and northern Spain soon, planning a scouting trip to Portugal in 2020. Looking for a couple of towns near the water, can be somewhat inland, not too touristy, and medium-sized or smaller. As a start to this planning, can you give me a couple of ideas consistent with this? I can, Jim. You mentioned the northern part of Spain and the Atlantic area. So I would start up in the northern area of Portugal with Viana do Castelo. It sounds like Vienna, like spelled like Austria, but it's not. It's V like Victor, I-A-N-O, do Castelo. And it's got a beautiful medieval center and a praia there, a beach there as well. It's not overrun by tourists, so you'll like that. I also recommend Esposende. I actually lived there one time. It's kind of quiet, low-key. You're on a beach and a river, the ocean and a river both. Got some nice golf courses nearby and access to other larger cities as well. That's up north toward the Spanish border. If you want to come down a little bit, Sines, S-I-N-E-S. Looks like signs. If you remember your geometry or whatever it was, I'm not a math major. And a beautiful beach there. That's part of the Alentejo coast. And down in the Algarve, Loule, L-O-U-L-E. And there's a great covered Moorish-inspired market there. And it's only about 30 minutes in from the water. So those are four really good starts for you, I think. Jan R. Hi, Jan. As a single senior from Canada, what's a good place to start looking for places to live? Well, a lot of expats feel comfortable outside of Lisbon in Cascais because it is definitely oriented toward tourists. There's a lot of English spoken. I mean, basically that's most of what you're going to get there. Also down in the southern region of the Algarve, there's Albufeira is a very big, they have like 100 cafes, bars, and restaurants in Old Town alone. It's very busy. If that's too busy for you, you'll find other areas like Lagos in the Algarve region too. But those are good English-speaking areas, and of course Lisbon. But it may be a little bit, if you're trying to get away from a city thing, I don't know if you are, that might be a little bit of a restrainer for you. Don't forget too, in both the book Escape to Portugal and Portugal 101, the video series, there are lots of suggestions about places to move, lots of capsule nugget summaries of various locations and scouting trips, itineraries laid out for you. All right, Jim, how easy is it for an American to retire there? Any minimum income requirements? The answer, first short answer, is very, very easy. The CEF, which is the Serviço Estrangeiros e Fronteiras, that's basically their immigration department, only requires proof of about the equivalent of €1,000 a month per person, per adult. So roughly right now, as I'm speaking to you, that's about $1,100. So you can see it's not where you have to demonstrate a huge amount of financial backing on your own. Steve R. Can children attend Portuguese public school? What is the curriculum like versus the USA? Well, I'll start by saying that children have to be in school. And there are various options, and one is, of course, the public system, and it is quite similar. I would actually say, from the people I know here, both students and older, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, some who have not graduated from high school or even gotten into high school, and they can discuss Plato and Aristotle and all kinds of interesting things about science, history, and everything. So that, to me, I infer from that the system here is quite comprehensive. The other possibility, there are several others, are going to private schools. There are international schools that missionaries, and there's a NATO base in Lisbon, and NATO children of NATO employees will go there, and of course lots of English spoken. There's an American school in Lisbon. There are of course also variations on this. You can go to a private school that is secular, or a private school that is of a religious orientation. So lots of choices. I will say this, if you're thinking about coming with children, that at the end of the 4th grade here, so say about 9 years old, those children will have to be able to demonstrate proficiency in the Portuguese language. So that's something to take into consideration. JW is learning, speaking of which, thank you Jay, is learning the language a problem? The short answer is no, and as a matter of fact, just to back this up a little bit, the Foreign Service Institute of the United States rates Portuguese in their category 1 of languages, which is like French and Italian and Spanish. It is no more complicated than that. If you can learn any language like that, or if you have had any brush with a second language in school, you will be able to learn Portuguese. There's lots of ways to get started ahead of time online with things like Duolingo. I use the Michelle Thomas tapes that I found on Amazon, CDs rather. They're fabulous. You can study here when you get here as well. So you'll be able to do it. Don't let that intimidate you. Shannon asks, are there restrictions on how often you can travel to the US if you change your residence to Portugal? This is a great question, Shannon, because one of the things, I'm just preparing for the conference that's coming up in October in Las Vegas, and one of the questions that I was answering for my handout there was, how do I deal with a partner, with a spouse who doesn't really want to relocate? What do I do? And one of the ways that my husband got me here was on the promise that I could return as many times as I wanted in the first year. I said I'm going to have to go back 3 or 4 times. I think I did go back 3 the first time, but it's averaged out to twice a year now. So, okay, so people are maybe going to want to be doing that. The key is you're probably going to have a D7 visa, which is a retirement visa, and you must be able to demonstrate that you've been in Portugal for 183 days a year. There's also some reason to believe that you can't spend more than 90 days a year outside of the Schengen zone. And if you are not familiar with that, just pop it in your search bar in Google and you'll find out a little bit more about the Schengen area. So the bottom line is they will look at your passport when you go to renew your residence card after it's up for it'll be for 1 year the first time, and then 2 years and so on. They will look and see, what you've been up to. So make sure you don't, leave town for 11 months. David L., do you recommend hiring a lawyer to assist with the visa process? I would say honestly, generally no, and the reason is you're going to have to work with a channeler anyway. Things have changed since I moved here 7 years ago, and it was just recently this year. So an individual can no longer work directly with a consulate or the U.S. Embassy or the Royal Mounted Police in Canada, for instance. They need a go-between, and that go-between is a channeler. So if you don't want any headache whatsoever with paperwork and trying to pull it all together, you may then want to consider having a lawyer who just deals with the channeler. As one little example, we have a friend here, just moved from Indiana with her husband and 4 children, and she's going about getting her residence here, but also because she's able to get a Latvian citizenship. So she hired a lawyer, and that lawyer is costing her about $1,500. If she didn't do that, it would have cost her under $100. So you always know when you hire a professional, you're going to pay for it. So it's up to you. Is it a trade-off that you want to do? Many people just say, I don't want to be bothered. And in that case, go for it. Sandra S. Are there restrictions on purchasing property if a U.S. citizen, and what is a realistic monthly budget if living there full-time? The answer to the first question is no. You as a U.S. citizen, when you come here, you can buy the same thing that any Portuguese citizen would be able to buy, any piece of property or home or apartment or whatever it is. Realistically, a couple can live on 22 to 2,500 euros, or let's say about $2,500 a month would totally cover you, and you would have an existence like you have in the United States currently, where you're not making any concessions. You can have air conditioning, you can go out to the movies, you can go do your entertainment, go out to eat, go to concerts and everything. If you're going to want to concentrate on an area more like Lisbon or Cascais or even Porto to a certain extent, you may want to bump that up to 3,000 euros a month, or dollars is fine actually, because the big thing that changes here is whatever your rent or mortgage is going to be. Mostly all the other costs stay the same. So, and singles, if you're single, you can figure about 2/3 of 1,800 or so like that will stand you in good stead. You have to bear in mind that the average Portuguese citizen only makes about 1,000 euros a month. So you'll do just fine with what you're making. And Scott M., this is the last question. Is it true that your U.S. pension is not taxed for the first 10 years? No, that is not true. It's only not taxed if it's a government-sourced income pension, and you can demonstrate that you have already paid taxes for it in the United States. There is another factor, which is the non-habitual resident tax status. So when you are applying for your residence here, if you opt for that, you may be able to find yourself saving on taxes over a period of time. But again, I am not a tax professional, I am not an attorney or an accountant, and it's best to talk this over with your own personal financial advisor. So look into it, because it has been of help to a number of people. And I think that takes care of it for today. Thanks so much for asking questions, and I'll see you next time.